So I mentioned earlier the functions that I use to create the data validation lists, to call and sort. Those are newer functions available through the Microsoft 365 subscription pack inside of Microsoft Excel. If you're on an earlier version, I mentioned we need an alternative, right? So we can do something very similar. Well, here it is. I'm going to walk you through how to create a pivot table that pulls the data from those three separate lists, the bills, expenses, and subscriptions, and creates a menu very similar to this that we could then use in the data validation settings. Take a look. So I'm still on the expense tracker worksheet. And I'm just going to pick an empty cell off to the right of that original list. I'm inside of the L column, but wherever you got an empty spot. So once I'm there, I now want to create a pivot table that pulls these three columns of data to create that one master list, one master column. Well, in order to create the pivot table based on separate ranges, I can't. You can't go to Insert PivotTable. It won't work. Sorry. It won't let you do separate ranges of data. But there's a hidden feature inside of Microsoft Excel that allows you to use the old, like I'm talking old pivot table wizard that will allow you to do this. But you got to get to this hidden feature through a shortcut key. Take a look. So again, I've got the L cell selected. On my keyboard, I'm going to tap the Alt key. And you'll notice that this opens up the menu commands at the top. Well, I'm going to press Alt and then the letter D, D like dog. Now I get a little screen tip that opens up and it says continue typing the menu sequence from earlier version of Office or press Escape to cancel. Well, the earlier shortcut that I now want from the earlier versions is P, P like pivot table. So I'll tap P and this opens up the pivot table and pivot chart wizard. All right. This is what Excel used to use. This was the default way of creating pivot tables way back in the day. Okay, but now we can get access to it through the shortcut keys. Alt D and then P, and this will open it up. So the first step wants to know, well, where's your data at? For ours, it's multiple consolidated ranges. So I'm going to select that, and I want to create a pivot table. I'm going to hit next. In step 2, it wants to know about page fields. Page fields are the filters within a pivot table. So I'm going to leave it just set, hey, create one of them for me, but we're actually going to remove it. So I'm going to leave it as is and I'll hit next. The next step wants to know, well, where's your data at that you want to consolidate? So I'll make sure I'm clicked into the range. I'm going to go to my monthly expense dashboard and I need to select each range. But a pivot table requires that you have at least 2 columns of data. So here, I'm going to grab B13 or my bill header all the way down to C30 or the bottom of the list in the C column. And I'm going to hit add. Now I'm going to do that 2 more times for my other 2 tables. I'm going to grab expense budget on down to the empty cells and I'll add it. And then one more time. Subscriptions, name, amount, all the way down, and I'll add it. So now we've got our 3 separate ranges that we're going to consolidate into one list within a pivot table. Next. All right, last step, just wants to know where you want to place it. It should be existing sheet right in that cell you had selected earlier. And I'll hit finish. So now it creates a pivot table. We don't need all of this. All we need is the list that it created. So inside the pivot table fields window, I'm going to drag out the column. Don't need that. I don't need the page, and I don't need the values. I just want the row with all of our values right there. Pretty slick, right? We've now got a list very similar to what I did using the toCall function, but now it's just a pivot table. And pivot tables have been around forever. So anybody can do this with a copy of Microsoft Excel. But there's a little bit of cleanup I need to do here. One, I need to get rid of this blank. I don't want that. And 2, I don't need these 2 labels. So really quickly to get rid of these, first thing, I'm going to get rid of the blanks. I'm going to go to a little drop down here for row labels, and I'll just uncheck the blank option. Gone. The next thing I want to do is get rid of the label at the top and the grand total label. So to do that, make sure I'm clicked into there somewhere. I'll go to the PivotTable Analyze tab and over to Options. Inside the Options window, I'm going to go to Totals and Filters, and I'm going to turn off the Show Grand Totals for rows and for columns. Get rid of those. Then I'm going to go to Display, and I'm going to turn off the option Display Field Captions and Filter Dropdowns. Let's turn that off. I'll hit OK. And now I got a list just like the one I created here. So now all I need to do is select my expense column. Let's get all of that there. I'll go back to my Data tab, Data Validation, and I'm just going to modify my offset command. Instead of the I column, I'm now going to reference the L column and whatever cell I started there. So I believe I started in L3, but I'll say L3, and then I'm just going to change these two I's to L's because we're now working with the L column. I'll hit OK, and my little drop down still works. Got our data right there. So this is just one alternative. There's probably other ways to do it, but I love pivot tables. I love how quickly it did it, and you can reference your list from the pivot table inside your data validation. So if you need the alternative, try this out. If not, you got the newer version of Excel, you got the to-call and the sort function, you're golden, you're good to go. All right, otherwise you could try that out right there.